obviously thank you all for coming, and you all know why you're here, so they just require a whole lot of introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rick Green. Hello. And Happy Harbor Comics is proud to present a full cast reunion of Prisoners of Gravity. And so we're just gonna, it's a little kind of informal Q&A, but for sure, the taste of Pure Spec on Friday night, you kind of touched on and got us kind of told us how the Prisoner of Gravity show got going. So I don't know if you want to give a little quick.
Who wasn't there Friday night? Okay, good. I walked into TV Ontario with a couple of ideas for programs, and the only name I knew there was Daniel Richler, who was the new head of arts. And he said, these are great ideas, but this one's for kids and these two are science, and that's not me. And I went, oh, okay. And then he mentioned they were looking to put about 8 minutes between 2 episodes of Doctor Who. So they'd run the 24-minute episodes, some TVO promo, have somebody talk about science fiction, comics, whatever, for 8 minutes, and then they'd run the second episode of Doctor Who. And wondered if I knew anything about science fiction and comics. Yeah, more science fiction than comics. He said, well, actually, we've got the person who's going to produce it is Mark Asquith. I went, oh, well, I play ball hockey with him every Sunday, so yeah, I know Mark. And he said, would you be interested in that? I said, sure. So I went home and quickly wrote out about a 5 or 6 minute long monologue. Came in the next day, did it to camera. Daniel walked out beaming, and Mark was there, of course, and said, you're hired. So we started putting stuff together, and then at the time, I knew I was going to be sitting in between 2 episodes of Doctor Who, and when you're sandwiched between a man who can travel around in a telephone booth, it's like, okay, I can't really be in front of a books in the library. We need some sort of, a bit of a twist here to play with. So I came up with the Commander Rick and the character. I did that actually for the audition, and we started developing it, and then TVO lost the rights to Doctor Who. YTV had just started, and suddenly this market, which was a bit of a gentleman's game, I guess, I would say gentlewomen, but it was all men back then, and people were now sort of outbidding each other. The TVO was shocked, they lost the rights, and they didn't know what to do. And I made the case, and Mark did as well, that there's 300-400 comics coming out every month, and how many books a year, and we can fill a half hour. So Daniel, God bless him, went and found extra money, and we were off to the races. Now they had 2 book shows competing, in print, 1 hour long, hosted by a couple, eventually hosted by Daniel, but by other people, and then this obscure show focusing on kind of the outlaw literature. And yet some weeks we outdrew them in terms of viewers. The first year we had problems, and the shows weren't usable. There was really not an understanding. The second year we got a producer and director who really got what we were trying to get across, but at that point we'd alienated pretty well everybody in Toronto. And I think all across Ontario was interested, because it was not respectful to fandom or to the literature itself, I think, in some ways. And in the second year, we had a theme each week. What we would originally envisioned actually happened. And Greg Throwback, who came in and met with Mark and I, just said, hey, I think you do this. And we're like, he's taking the words out of our mouth. Okay, what do we, yeah. And, the opening should actually show the artwork that Ty did in order to tell a story, rather than randomly and let people figure it out. And then, anyway, there was a lot of stuff going on, but the set got much better, and I think the first season, as far as I knew, was gone. Like Mark deliberately had it bulked and erased it. So I don't think it's also not usable because there was all kinds of film footage which you can't get the clearance for 6 months later. So it was interesting. At the same time, Batman, Michael Keaton Batman was coming out, and there was this huge awareness suddenly that these things, like it sold, I'm told, $250 million worth of merchandise before it opened. And there was a sense then that this stuff's worth money. So we want to show covers and artwork and stuff as we were interviewing people. And the big companies wouldn't give us permission in writing. But they knew what we were doing, and they trusted Mark implicitly. So they said, we won't sue you. Go ahead, but we can't put it in writing. Nobody could put it in writing. So TV Ontario, being a government agency, their lawyers are like, well, it has to be a contract. Now they said they would, what? They said they won't sue us, it's okay. So I went back, and finally Daniel just, again, stepped in. Daniel really shepherded us and said, don't worry, they'll be fine. And so when we went, and we used to go down to the Merrill collection, it was called the Spaced Out Library then, in Toronto to do research. And they were really helpful, but they were put off by the show, by the stupidity of it, and at the first season. And what happened, of course, is people started in the second season, those who were left watching. I think we went from 80,000 from the first episode down to 13,000 the next week. That's how bad the first season was. Yeah. So it was a building process in the second season. But what happened is went into the library one day and someone said, oh, hi, I saw an episode last time. It was good. I saw an episode last time, it was good. I was like, there was a shock. I said, yeah, change things. Keep watching. And it built and built and built. And eventually we were hearing that the stores were wanting to know what we were doing ahead of time so they could have the book in stock because it would sell out. The libraries they could tell because the fall, whatever day we aired, and I think it changed over the years, but whatever it was, the next day, there was a rush. Yeah, that book would be gone from the library system in Toronto, I think, well, across Ontario. So, and we kept going. We did 5 full seasons, 4 of them good, and then Space picked them up when they went on the air. It was Canadian content. They ran it at like 6 in the morning, so like I remember up then. But yeah, exactly. God bless VCRs.
We're going to bed.
Yeah, going to bed. That's right. Yeah, and so yeah, and it was a great experience. But it really was a team effort. As I said Friday night, the interviews that you see are rarely me doing the interview. They were done. We were on a tiny budget, so we could afford to send 1, sometimes 2, maybe 3 of us to a big convention. We had 2 cameras, and we interviewed anyone and everyone. We read their material, so there was a lot of research, but I was also doing the Red Green Show at the same time, writing, acting, and directing it eventually on the Red Green Show. So it was an interesting time. My kids kind of didn't know me that well. And my marriage ended up eventually, although I wouldn't blame it necessarily on that. But anyway, it was a busy time, and Mark and Greg and Shirley Brady they were there. Greg especially was there, and Mark were there full time and just made it happen. They were doing the reading, they were doing the research, and we really brainstormed and tried to make the show. Like I went in with it. Look, I know that people who are real fans are going to even put up with that first season, but I want to grab people who have no idea or are not interested. I want to do something that my mom is going to come away from going, I had no idea. And that really became a measuring stick of how successful we were. If I felt like you didn't have to know who Jack Kirby was to be impressed by an episode on Jack Kirby. We wanted to always bring people up to speed, and that's always the challenge. It was the same on History Bites. How do you do a show about history that to someone who may not know anything? And I don't think we succeeded very well on History Bites. You really kind of did have to know a lot of history to get, yeah, and it was on some levels, it was in-jokes. And the more you knew, the funnier it was. So historians are killing themselves laughing, and other people are going, everybody loves Raymond's on, including my kids. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience because by giving it each episode a topic, it allowed us to actually, for my character, for me to say something in writing. So we had these great quotes. You got to hear all these diverse ideas, which was fascinating. And then I got to kind of tie it all together and provide some editorial point of view on top of that, going in and coming out of it. And that was really an interesting experience. The episodes were frustrating for people, though, because if you were a fan of Neil Gaiman, unless it was an episode on Sandman, there was Neil Gaiman for 15, 20, 30 seconds. And this is someone you bought all this comics, you have seen his picture. There he is speaking, and he's gone after 30 seconds. So what was nice, though, was when you tuned in next week, there was Neil Gaiman. And there was Neil Gaiman again and again and again. Eventually there was an episode on it. So